So today, I'm back at the Oak Hill Cemetery, and we're going to explore some more Battle Creek history and the people that helped shape this community, make this city possible. So come along and join me. Before we get too far into the video, I wanted to revisit Jonas Decker. In my first video on Oak Hill Cemetery, I made an error and said the incorrect date for the year that he died. He actually died in 1910. Just wanted to call that out. Let's move on to the first person in today's tour. When you first drive into Oak Hill Cemetery, one of the most prominent visible markers on the right-hand side when you take the right lane is the grave marker of Carroll Lathrop Post. He was the brother of serial magnate C.W. Post. As early as the 1880s, he and his brother were salesmen of farm machinery. They also did some real estate development down in Texas. And when C.W. Post later came to the sanitarium, and following his stay at the sanitarium, developed the Postum Cereal Company, his brother came and joined him in the company. After C.W. Post died, Carroll Post took over as chairman of the board of Postum Cereal Company and succeeded C.W. Post as president. Carroll Lathrop Post and his wife Mary Stanley Post were entombed at the base of this monument here at Oak Hill Cemetery. We're now going to visit the gravesite of Florence Lilian Bush. She was a popular author, teacher, painter, and poet, and one of Battle Creek's most dynamic women. She was born 1 month before the assassination of President Lincoln in 1865. She lived to the age of 107, dying in 1972. Among her books was a children's book that she co-authored with her sister Isabel, Goose Creek Folks. She's laid to rest here at Oak Hill Cemetery next to her sister. Now we're going to visit the gravesite of a MoTown legend, Junior Walker, or as you might think of him as Junior Shotgun Walker. Few other local artists have had as great an impact on modern music as Junior Walker and his band, the All-Stars. He was actually born Autry Walt Jr. in Blytheville, Arkansas in 1942. His nickname Junior Walker came about because he opted to walk to school rather than ride the bus. He moved to Chicago at a young age and tried to sneak into clubs to see his favorite saxophone players. As time moved on, he formed his own R&B band, moving over to South Bend and eventually to Battle Creek. He was signed by Berry Gordy from MoTown, along with his All-Stars, which made up of a guitarist, Willie Woods, an organist, Vic Thomas, and the drummer, James Graves. Their famous hit, Shotgun, climbed to #1 on the soul charts and #4 on Billboard's pop list in 1965. He had many other hits throughout the years, including How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, I'm a Road Runner, Pucker Up Buttercup, What Does It Take, These Eyes. So Junior Walker and the All-Stars were a legend in the music industry, and he is buried right here at Oak Hill Cemetery. We're next going to visit the grave of Arthur Herbert Kimball. He was born in 1850 and died in 1894 and was the first of 3 generations of medical men to devote their lives to the health of the people of Battle Creek. He first visited here in 1883 and finding the climate better for his health, moved his entire family and medical practice here the following year. In 1886, he and his wife Marion and son settled into their new home on Capitol Avenue. That home now stands as a museum, and I featured it in some of my other videos. There is a historic marker in front of the house. So this is the final resting place of Mr. Arthur Herbert Kimball, MD, and he certainly had a profound impact on the Battle Creek community as being one of the earliest doctors. As we continue, we're going to take a look at 4 distinctly different grave sites related to the Civil War. The first is Edwin Vanwinkle. He went off to fight the Civil War like many other men from Michigan. He was originally from Ontario County, New York. He attained the rank of sergeant, and after the war ended, he came home to Battle Creek and lived the rest of his days until his death in 1891. But he went unrecognized as one of the country's many heroes, and it came to be known that he was actually a Medal of Honor recipient. Oak Hill Cemetery received some letters and correspondence with the Medal of Honor Historical Society. Over the course of verification of records, they determined that yes, Edward Vanwinkle was awarded the Medal of Honor. So in May of 1985, a special ceremony was held befitting of the hero at Oak Hill Cemetery to honor the man who had taken an advance of a skirmish line and drove the enemy's cannoneers from their guns, and in the process saved many lives during the war. Mr. Vanwinkle is one of 2 Medal of Honor winners from the Civil War buried at Oak Hill Cemetery. The next significant Civil War marker we're going to look at today is that of Brigadier General William H. Revere. He died in 1865, and he was only 30 years of age as a brigadier general. So quite an interesting marker and historical significance of the Civil War. The next Civil War marker that I was going to call your attention to in this video is that of Julius Granger Fisk. He was a Civil War Union officer, and he served as major and commander of the 2nd Kansas Volunteer Cavalry. His marker is quite artistic, but it's faded over the years, and you can still make out his name on the marker and the gravestone, as well as some of the details of his family. And the 4th Civil War monuments I wanted to show in this video were that of 2 unknown soldiers. The story behind this is that during the Civil War, a troop train filled with wounded soldiers was headed to a hospital. On the train were 2 young men who had died en route. The next stop on the train's journey was Battle Creek. Here the bodies of the 2 young men were removed from the train. Neither body carried any identification, and their young faces were not recognized by any of the townspeople. Not knowing what to do, a local citizen, David Aldrich of Battle Creek, donated 2 graves for their interment. So to this day, it's not been ascertained as who these young men were. They rest here at Oak Hill Cemetery, with the old markers identifying their final resting place as unknown soldiers. It's kind of sad to think that somewhere back in history, 2 boys never came home, and their parents were always wondering what happened to them when they went off to the Civil War. But here they are at Oak Hill Cemetery. So we're going to visit next the Mausoleum of the Nichols family. This mausoleum was for Edwin C Nichols and his family, and it was designed by his son-in-law, Robert T Newberry, in 1883. Edwin C Nichols was born in 1838 and died in 1924. Was a boy of 10 when he came to Battle Creek with his parents. Did a lot of odd things working for a general store. Eventually began working for his father's business, and they helped organize railroads and local industries in town, including the Battle Creek Gas Company. In later years of his life, for nearly 50 years, he served the Old National Bank as president, and he was made chairman of the board in 1919. He was also the mayor of Battle Creek in 1880. The building is made from quarried limestone, and it has 12 crypts, but only 8 are occupied by himself and 7 other members of his family. His father and mother and other members of his family have a monument just behind the mausoleum. We are next going to visit the gravesite of another musician who also went to Battle Creek High School. Enos E Wanzer was famous for his writing the song 25 Miles for Edwin Starr. He also toured up and down the East Coast playing his trumpet with MoTown bands, including the award-winning Temptations and Stevie Wonder. He died in Battle Creek in 2014. As a tribute to his musical history, his family has etched on his tombstone, "Papa was a Rolling Stone," to honor his legacy. We're now going to go back in time to the beginning of the seats of government in Battle Creek and visit the grave of the first village president, William Brooks. He was village president in 1850 when the role was first established. He had originally moved to Battle Creek in 1843 and entered the hardware business, and later formed a partnership with the son-in-law of a racist hussy. He was elected the first village president. The title of village presidents only lasted from 1850 to 1858, where it was held by 6 different men, and then it was eventually changed to the title of mayor in 1859. So this is the monument for William Brooks and his family. Moving forward in time, let's look at the first person to hold the title of mayor, and that was Elijah Pendle. He was a native of Genesee County, New York, and came to Battle Creek in 1855. And he was elected mayor in 1859 as the first official mayor of Battle Creek. He was later elected again in 1861, 1862, and 1864. What's interesting about his story is he led the first campaign ever waged in Battle Creek against the saloons. He was married to Mary A. Jennings, and he aroused so much enthusiasm against the saloons with Mrs. Pendle in the lead. She and several other women visited the city saloons and started smashing beer kegs, emptying the contents into the street. This was one of the great local events in Battle Creek and caused great excitement at the time. There was a book later published by a Dr. Lewis which credited the Women's Temperance Crusade having originated in Battle Creek, Michigan, and that Mrs. Pendle was the leader of the movement. Elijah Pendle died in 1876, and this is his grave marker, along with his legendary wife, Mary Pendle, and other members of his family. The next notable figure that we're going to look at that is buried at Oak Hill Cemetery is Walter Harper North. He was born in Somerset, Michigan, and graduated from North Adams High School there. And at the age of 21, he enrolled in Hillsdale College, and then graduated later from the University of Michigan Law School in 1899. He served as a circuit judge here in Battle Creek, and during his years on the bench, he presided over criminal trials and civil cases, including the suit brought by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg against his brother W.K. Kellogg over the right to the Kellogg trademark. For nearly 22 years, he was the Calhoun County Circuit Judge, and then 25 years was on the state Supreme Court. He died in 1952 at the age of 81. In my previous video on Oak Hill Cemetery, I covered George R. Willard, who served as the U.S. Congressman for this area, which was called District 3, and he served from 1873 to 1877 in the U.S. Congress. There are actually 2 other U.S. congressmen buried here at Oak Hill Cemetery. The first is Joseph Lawrence Hooper. He moved to Battle Creek in 1881 and had aspirations to be a Shakespearean actor, but decided he was not tall enough to be successful, so he entered business college and studied law instead. He passed the bar exam in 1899 and hung out his shingle and became a famous criminal lawyer. It was said he participated in practically every murder trial between 1902 and 1925, either as defense counsel or prosecutor. He later served as a U.S. congressman from 1925 to 1934, serving until his death. He died from a heart attack moments after delivering an eloquent speech on the floor of the House of Representatives in defense of Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh, the great aviator. Following Joseph Hooper's death, another man was elected to fill his seat, and that man's name was Henry M. Kimball. Ironically, he served from January 3rd, 1935 until October 19th, 1935, where he died in office. The man who succeeded him by being elected to fill the seat was Verner Wright Main, and Verner Wright Main is buried at Oak Hill Cemetery. During the First World War, Werner Wright Main volunteered for military service with the field artillery, and he was actually in training at a camp in Louisville, Kentucky when the armistice was signed. He came home and served as the State House of Representative from 1927 to 1929. He was also a member of the Battle Creek School Board, and then he was elected to fill the vacancy left by Henry M. Kimball. He was unsuccessful in his bid for re-election at the end of the term, so he returned to Battle Creek and resumed his practice of law. He died in 1965. We're next going to visit the gravesite of a Battle Creek legend, John W. Patterson. He was known as Pat Patterson in the community. He was Battle Creek's first black police officer, but before he entered law enforcement, he began his early life in Omaha, Nebraska, and then he became interested in baseball at an early age. His baseball career started in 1890 when he became second baseman for a semi-professional team in Fremont, Nebraska. In 1899 and 1900, he played with the Columbia Giants of Chicago. Mr. Patterson rose to national prominence in 1895 when he became playing manager of the Page Fence Giants of Adrian, one of the great Negro baseball teams of the nation, which made many extensive barnstorming tours. He served as a manager of the team for 3 years, and in 1901 he came back to Battle Creek as a playing manager of the Malta Vita Independent team. Later, he was the coach of the Battle Creek High School baseball team when it won the state championship in 1907. In 1909, he was appointed as a patrolman for the Battle Creek Police Department and served in that capacity until his death. He died after he succumbed from injuries after trying to capture a patient that had escaped the Veterans Administration facility. And in the struggle to capture the man, he had an injury. He went in for surgery on the injury, and it didn't go well, and he passed away sadly. So Battle Creek lost a beautiful legend in 1940 when he died. For many years, he was known in the Battle Creek community for being the officer that directed traffic at the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Capitol. He certainly would be an incredible role model for kids of any age, even today, looking back at his legacy. So he's quite a wonderful gravesite to visit and honor. If you visit his grave, you'll see a police officer's badge next to his gravestone. Next, I wanted to talk about a family called the Angels. It's spelled Angell. Jedediah Angell was born in 1781 and he died in 1850. He had several children. One of his sons, George, became a justice of the peace over in Bedford Township. Another of his sons, Jerome, married Mary Pendle, the daughter of the first mayor of Battle Creek, whose mother was an activist in the Temperance movement, as we mentioned earlier in this video. One of his grandsons, Archangel, purchased the old Moon Inn on East Michigan Avenue and changed the name to Angels. In 1936, the Angel Inn was featured in a Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon as the tavern operated by an archangel. The tavern used this promotion on a postcard throughout the 1940s in Battle Creek. This is the weathered marker of the Piper family. There were many Pipers in the community. I'm specifically going to talk about Edward Piper Jr. After his family had arrived in Battle Creek in 1864, Edward helped his parents in the operation of a 160-acre farm until 1878, when he went to Nebraska on some business related to his father. He returned in 1880 and became associated with a lumber company and operated it for 5 years. With the expansion of the residential districts, Edward Jr. retired from the lumber business and assisted his father in the platting of a large portion of acreage on the farm that was south of Maple Street, now Capitol Avenue, and father and son engaged in real estate transactions. It was Edward Piper Jr. who donated 20 acres that made up Piper Park. At the time, it included Piper Pond, one of the most popular ice skating areas in the city. The pond was drained when the land was given to the city for a park. 35 acres of his remaining land were plotted into lots and were sold for residential use. So if you live in the Piper Park area, chances are your land at one point was owned by Edward Piper Jr. and his father, Edward Piper Sr. So I just thought that was an interesting little story about a very popular park in the city of Battle Creek and the family that made it possible. So the next time you're out at Piper Park and enjoying some sunshine or perhaps a stroll on a fall afternoon, look around at the trees and the beautiful park and think about Edward Piper Jr. perhaps, and the legacy that he left behind for our community. The next gravesite is that of Floyd Bates, who was a former Harlem Globetrotter. He was born in Flint and came to Battle Creek in 1949. From 1939 to 1947, he played with the Harlem Globetrotters. He was also a professional softball player with the Joe Louis Punchers, the Flint Yellow Dogs, and the Kalamazoo Cardinals. He served in the U.S. Navy from 1942 to 1945, and Bates owned and operated a pool room here in Battle Creek from 1956 to 1957, and then was employed by the U.S. Post Office. He died in 1974. He was an incredible athlete and showman with the Harlem Globetrotters. His grave marker is in a sunny spot at Oak Hill Cemetery, and it commemorates his service in the U.S. Navy. The final story in today's video will be about the American Legion Circle. Also known as the Legion Circle, it came about at a request from Roosevelt American Legion Hospital, where they asked Oak Hill Cemetery to set aside a place for the burial of veterans. The first 6 veterans were buried there in 1924 on Memorial Day. Since then, 176 additional veterans have been placed there, including veterans from World War II and also Posey Chapel, the first Battle Creek boy to be killed in action in Vietnam, and former mayor of Battle Creek, Raymond Turner. The older burial markers are similar to those in the national cemeteries with the white marble. The newer ones are flat bronze. The American flag flies over the circle continuously, and it's not taken down until it shows signs of wear and a new one is obtained. The last burial at the Legion Circle was held in 1980. During Memorial Day, the circle is especially beautiful with an American flag at every marker and the beautiful flowers on every grave. When you walk around the circle, you'll notice that there are veterans from every branch of the service, from Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, and even the Coast Guard. It's quite an impressive monument honoring those that have served, as well as a hallowed place of great heroes. So that's going to do it for today's tour of Oak Hill Cemetery and another collection of stories that I was able to research and share with you today about some of the history of Battle Creek and its people. If you liked what you saw today, please give me a like, leave me a comment, give me some suggestions down there in the comment section of other monuments and stories that you've heard that you'd like me to research. And of course, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on the next video. And I'm certain I will be returning to Oak Hill Cemetery because this place, like so many other cemeteries of historic nature, have a lot of stories to tell. So until next time, thanks for watching.